I guess we could turn the speakers on really loud out there so that they have to hear us anyway, huh? Well, I'm going to get started here. I want to thank everybody for coming. For all you out there eating food, thank you for listening. We're running time, so I just want to do a little bit of background to our process here and where we've come from. So, from time to time, it's always worth just doing some reflection and visioning and thinking about where we are and where we're going. And I think with this modern world and how fast it changes and how things change so quickly, that it probably means we have to almost do it more often. But the other part of that is what I think brings us to a process like this, is that it's just, we're doing our things and we get tired. We don't have them very well centered. We don't have them a lot of energy. We've kind of done it faithfully for many years. We're a church, you think of our ministries like interfaith hospitality out there. We've, those decades. And, we need those re-energizing times. So it's some hope for that by getting some clarity and hitting the ground running. So, and the other piece is, say, well, can we do it ourselves? What do we need? And no, not usually. You can do it yourself, but it's usually half done and half baked, and it leaves you kind of. It's something. It really helps to have that person from the outside come in and stand there and look at and review and walk with us at. So it really does take someone from the outside at times, and so that's the kind of the thinking behind the council at this point. So about a year or two ago, we thought it was time again, and we created a team then to look at different people or consultants, we should say, that help churches walk through these kinds of things. So we created a team, and they brought up questions, narrowed it down to 3 people, and they interviewed those three people, and it was unanimous to go with Kristen. We thought she was marvelous and said, her. That's the one. So that's where it came to there. And with that, I start with a prayer and a blessing. And how about if we let Kristen, she's what we're here for. So let's pray. God, we do give you thanks that you do lead and guide us and you do stir us again and again. And on this day of Pentecost, we look for that inspiration, that stirring, that our energy might be renewed and our commitment and service might just find new energy there. Bless us in this. Bless Kristen as she guides us. Amen.
Well, good morning. How are you today? It was good worship for those of you who are going to be staying for the second service. Very fun to be with you. My name is Kristen, and I have been with you now for a while with your leadership and your congregation as you have sought to carefully listen before you venture forth in any particular direction, thinking that staying faithful to the congregation's members' heartbeats and love for this place and what's important to them. I like to call it the church DNA, right? There are things that are unique about you as a congregation, and we don't want to lose those. So as we think about the future, we need to first kind of root ourselves carefully in where God has planted you. And so I thank you for your time this morning and for your participation as we go through a process of kind of self-discovery and pray along the way that Spirit would be with us and breathe into our process and speak loud enough for us to hear. And so this is kind of the process as we've gone now. Anytime we talk about findings, it's always good for us to start with, well, where did we get that? So we start with kind of the process of self-discovery that you embarked on quite a while ago, over a year and a half ago. You started with a congregational. So on this page, this is what I'm referencing. If you don't have it, Donna, who's in this gorgeous pink dress, will hand you one of those. In the process for gathering data. So where did we come up with the stuff we're going to talk about today? Well, it came from you. It came from you. So we did a congregational vitality survey in, I think it was spring or early summer of 2017, almost a year ago now. 107 people participated in that survey through the ELCA. 62% of your average worship attendance, which is actually a pretty good rate these days. Then there was a comprehensive ministry review, I believe, through your synod, which is a fantastic in-depth deep dive into the ministries that you have going on, and they came back with highlights of things that are going well, areas to watch out for, and recommendations moving forward. Then when I became part of this process, then we did some internal listening with interviews and focus groups. So through one-on-one conversations, about 66 people, I believe. That was the total for great conversation. And those conversations were on things like, what drew you here? What do you care about? What's important to you? What must never change? Where do you want to see this church go in the future? What do you want it to be for the next generation? What's an important way that we can serve neighbor? How do you want to show up in the community? Those kinds of things. Then we held where's Daniel? Two listening community panels where we simply invited the community folks, whether they're leaders or members, to just be present with us and tell us what's going on in the community around us. As Christians, we have this desire to serve, but very rarely do we have the opportunity to listen first, to hear what's really going on with our neighbors. Before we rush to solve problems or show up, let's just be part of our discipleship should be one of listening, so we can walk with people in need. Then we did a leadership systems inventory, and the leadership and I met yesterday for a couple hours and dug deep in the data, which we won't do as deep today, but finding out kind of what makes this congregation tick in terms of its leadership style, how we make decisions together, who gets information when, where, and how that all works together. And then also a generosity index, which was given to me, which gives me a snapshot of your financial picture, and also giving practices, which helps me make recommendations and is really just for my benefit to kind of understand how you're put together. So those are the 6 areas that we did gathering data, gathering information, because we can't march forward until we understand who this church is, helping you name clearly what's important to you, and kind of getting some idea about where the Spirit might be pulling you into a sense of call in the future. So what did we find out? Are you ready? Okay. And if you're not, there's more coffee out there if you're having trouble falling asleep. Assets and affirmations. Let's start with what's going really well. And there's a lot. I only listed the ones that I thought might give you the biggest bang for your buck, which might be the most important platforms of strength that you can utilize and build on in the future. And that's you have a healthy congregational culture. And I want to tell you, as one who works across this country with ELCA churches, that is unique and special. And we give thanks for that. There has been a particular attention paid to the health of relationships and leadership, to the centrality of worship, to the care of the people, for the spirit of grace that permeates this place, and for the way that you each are called to serve. And I am so very, very thankful, because it makes our journey together that much better that you all have paid attention and taken good care of your church community. So I want to lift that up. And also, actually, before we dive any deeper, I want to say thank you to you all for deciding to have a partner with you dig deep and uncover what's going on at Ascension. It takes a fair amount of courage, really, to invite somebody to come in and say, okay, tell us what's really going on. Certainly on behalf of the pastors and council, that takes a fair amount of bravery to say, look beneath the hood. Right? So kudos for that. Okay, second thing, part of your DNA, which will have to find its way in the future, is strong outreach and service. Very much understanding that as a called and gifted people, we are to turn around and serve neighbor in whatever fashion that is. But that cannot be separated from a sense of grace, that we are loved right into a service of neighbor. Those two things live together and absolutely are essential for your life together. The faith life of people of Ascension, that third one, that's really just, for me, an indicator that you have some growing and mature faith here. Not everywhere do I encounter people who take it very seriously for study, for learning, for connection and relationships, and for regular worship. So I want to lift up the fact that faith is a part of your everyday life, as Pastor Daniel's sermon talked about today. It is the thing that we bring with us that is part of our identity, and you have kind of a mature and very faithful membership that takes that very seriously. They're not waiting for the pastor or some leader to tell them what to do, but you own it, and you're on your own journey with God, and that's really exciting because we can do a lot with that. And then the fourth thing, and I put this is a desire or a want or a longing, but it's a good thing, and that is for people want to continue that growth of faith. Especially in busy lives, people living far away, people having just very little time. How do we continue to grow in faith? And that's often in relationship with one another. It's not like an online study, although it could be, but really wanting to deepen connections with people here, people who believe and walk with each other as that kind of grace space. And also, the other thing that I heard was a desire to be equipped for evangelism. And as you think about how the world has shifted around us and does not necessarily support or line up with the life of the church and life as a Christian, it's even more important for us to think about and to be equipped to go out and share that good news in whatever ways naturally that we can, that align with what we believe and line up with the relationships and bring kind of a witness to what God's up to in the world. So there were a few people that were quite articulate about a bigger desire, and that is, we know we have the good news, we just don't quite know how to share it with others. So a desire there. Any questions about those affirmations? Again, lots and lots and lots of other good stuff, but those are the ones I thought were the most important. Any questions about those? It's good stuff, right? That's the fun part. All right, feel free to raise your hand. Challenges and needs. I've not met a church yet, and probably won't until Jesus comes, that doesn't have some challenges in front of it. It being 2018 and a world that is very much opposed to a life of love and grace and service for neighbor. And so there's a lot in front of us. But let's take a look at what's in front of Ascension. So you have a fantastic lay leadership system that involves a lot of people. And they do a lot of programs and ministry and connect a lot of people. But as we begin to think about what those pinch points are for busy folks who might live far away or might be very, very tapped for their time, we have to be just really thoughtful about the way that we organize ourselves so that we have the reserve energy to do ministry and it's not taken up with a structural piece of keeping the engine going. Am I making sense there? So it takes a lot to keep your engine going here because you have a lot of boards and a lot of really great ministries. And so we just want to be really thoughtful that we don't want those structures to get in the way ever of the amount of impact for ministry that we can have and the deepening of faith for folks. Is that making sense? So I don't have any particular recommendations except to just to say watch that. We don't ever want it to feel like, for example, my grandma's church in Northern California, they had a dying church. Well, actually, it's still alive. It kind of rebirthed. But at the time, they were in deep decline. And there was like 50 people there in worship. And it took 80 people to run the ministries of that church. Right? So you see the fulcrum there. So we just want to be really thoughtful. Because the most important thing, right, is that we are a community of grace called to serve. That's the most important thing. How we do that, I want you to be free to think about that there's all kinds of different ways we can do that. Okay, and then financial management. While there is great trust, and that's part of the healthy congregational culture, great trust of leaders, just understanding that the particular way that we're doing financial management right now, well, there's no mismanagement. It's a little bit clunky and a little cumbersome. So we're working to, I say we on behalf of your leaders, we're working to kind of make sure that we're aligning and kind of curtailing some of that to make it a little easier to understand, easier to share and communicate so that everybody has a strong sense of where we are financially. The big one, the big kahuna, need for clarity of purpose. And Pastor Dan alluded to this. When I got here and engaged with your leadership, they were saying, we're doing fine, we're doing great, we just don't really have a sense of kind of where we're going. And we have all these great ministries, but they're all kind of running in their own circles, and so we're not quite sure how everything lines up together. So in a world that is feeling like it's just all over the map, I think people are longing for some clarity, some focus, so that we're not trying to be everything for everyone. We're not trying to do everything. We're not inventing new things to do, right, to take up time, activities to occupy our calendars, but really that we're focused on having the best impact for a community of grace called to serve. And so that's a huge one that we're going to be getting after, and I'll share with you about what we're going to do in a minute. Communication and technology. Who's overwhelmed already with a number of ways that we can communicate in this world? Yep. Okay, so churches are even harder because not only do you need to communicate needs to members about what's going on and essential information, but you have all these channels, and then we have all these boards, and then we have the council, and then we have staff. So it is crazy. It is crazy hard. And so we're going to be spending some time making sure that there's best practices, that we have a strategic communication plan put in place so that you guys as members and as leaders know exactly what's happening. And we've kind of figured out what the pathways are for the best possible way. Unfortunately, just because there's technology doesn't mean it's easier. It gets actually more complicated. Which is okay. We just have to take a look at that and spend some. We have a great story to steward. So what a great thing that we get to do. So we better make sure that we're putting all the infrastructure together to make sure that we can steward that together. Engaging new people. So almost everybody that I talked to, those 66 people, said that they were drawn or continue to be drawn into life here at Ascension because of the connections with people, the spirit of welcome. How about for you guys? Yeah? Yes? Okay, and for those of you who are not, you can visit with them later. So almost everybody said, I felt really welcome. People came up and greeted me, and it was fantastic. But what I've discovered is that you're really great as a culture at saying hello, and here's the coffee and bathrooms, and here's worship, but not super great with them after that. So there's a sense of, we're glad you're here, and then we don't really know what to do with you. Right? We just kind of, good, we just come, just jump in. And of course, you have an amazing array of ministries, and it's probably is a little overwhelming for new people. So I would like you to do some thinking, especially in terms of evangelism and engaging new people in the ministry. How is it that you help them find a pathway for belonging? An intentional way for them to come alongside you and have those sticky moments where you get to know people's names and faces and something about them so that you actually can say hi to them next Sunday and remember a name. Or you get connected with somebody through a time of study and get really kind of intimate and learn a lot with the group. So instead of just throwing a free-for-all and throwing people into new things, which used to work, actually, because we had people who were moving from other churches and knew the dance, right? But those assumptions, we can't operate on those assumptions that people know how to jump into church life anymore, right? If we value their faith journey with Jesus, it would be important for us to be thinking about how can we create a thoughtful path so that they can come along into our community and experience the best, not everything, but the best things to help them in their own faith journey and become a part of this community of faith. Does that make sense? Yep, a lot of churches are struggling with that because we've been working on the assumption for a long time that everybody knows to go to church. Everybody knows to give. Everybody knows to come to worship. Everybody knows to get involved, and they know the rules. And I don't think that's fair, actually, and certainly not true. All right, so those are the biggest challenges you have. There's some other little ones, but those are the ones that I think are the most important for you to be holding. Again, good news, this is not really, really hard stuff. You don't have big, huge, scary things in your history or in your future. Questions about those challenges? Okay, all right. So what does this mean? One of the things that we do is we have found in our work over the last 30-some years that if churches can wrap their heads around and get busy with 5 different areas of church life and be making some progress or at least be cognizant and moving forward in those 5 areas, they have a really, really good chance of continuing to stay vibrant and healthy and have large impact on ministry. And those things are below. You'll see travel plan there on your sheet. Missional readiness is just a read on your ability to change. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the ones below are shared vision, leadership, faith integration, generosity, and story. And so we have found that if the churches can kind of get a sense of where they are in those areas and then get a kind of a plan to move forward, they've got a good chance of staying really healthy into the future. So shared vision, missional readiness. My read for the ability for this congregation to be adaptable and flexible and move into change. Moderate. Is that fair? Moderate. So I would say you're a thoughtful people. You like to be engaged and help make decisions as a congregation, which naturally slows the process down a little bit. But also really want to know why. Why are we changing? What would this new initiative mean? Why would we do that? And so when you have people who are taking in that seriously, we really do have to come back to the congregation and have conversations quite a bit. And so that tends to slow down the speed of which you're able to adapt and change things. And so I would say you're moderate, which means you as a congregation need to just be really thoughtful about how you do any kind of change. It probably needs to be tightly connected to your mission. It needs to have the support consensus, if you will, of the congregation, and people have to have a sense of why are we doing this, which is okay, but it means that you have to give yourselves, you have to just give yourself some time, and that's just the way it goes. Okay, so these 5 areas, shared vision is the top recommendation for you to get after, and I'll talk about what next steps are. I'm with you for the next 18 months or so as we walk together and deal with these waypoints that we're going to be talking about. So I'm the one that runs the groups and pokes people in the shoulder, reminds them to stay on task and do the work and get back with the congregation with their recommendations. But shared vision is just that. It's a vision of the people that is shared. That everyone can say, oh yeah, I had a part in that. That makes sense. That's rooted in who we are. That's not somebody who went into a room on a Saturday afternoon with a whiteboard and came out with a vision, right? It belongs to the people. This will do several things. One is we want to continue to create trust and keep the level of trust that you have. We want to unify things and help create some order for a very busy place. Help make sense of how things are connected. Leadership. We want to look at current leadership systems and make sure that we're make sure that we're right sizing and doing things so that we are efficient, that we are effective, that we are being communicative and involving a lot of people, but for the sake of the impact of ministry, not for the sake of structural things. So we just have to balance that. And I don't have any preconceived notions about what that looks like, and it might not mean anything except just cleaner communication, faster meetings. I don't know. Would that be? I don't know. But we're going to look at, because you have so many moving parts, we really need to look at making sure that staff roles are aligned and that council is helping to shape some of those pathways for communication. And there's the intentional belonging pathway that we talked about. So all that work will happen under the leadership pathway. The faith integration, this is really things of faith. So this is studies, these are service projects typically, this is certainly worship. People are very passionate about worship here, so we want to make sure that we continue to think about what's inspiring and appropriate for the groups that we're engaging. And if we bring in new people, might we need to kind of expand our idea of worship? I don't know. But we need to be thoughtful that worship is not just for us, right? It's to love God and love neighbor, like everything else. And so how might we think about worship as an expansive way to invite people into a relationship with his community and with God as well? One of the things I want to highlight for you is you have people coming from a long ways away. And so they're typically, as life becomes really busy for younger generations and they're coming from further away, we need to be really thoughtful because they're not going to be coming to church 3 times a week like I did when I was a kid, right? For choir, Sunday, and then confirmation or whatever. So we have to make sure that our experiences of church, whether that's Sunday morning or a Wednesday or whatever, are the most helpful and effective ways to do all the things that we want to do for folks. So connect them deeply in relationship, have opportunities for study, make sure we have some opportunities for worship that are appropriate for the groups that we're talking to. So instead of kind of scattershot, we've always done it this way, just really be thoughtful about the Sunday morning experience, particularly the Sunday morning experience. and making sure we're thoughtful about how programs run, how we're doing hospitality, are we creating opportunities for relationships and conversation, all that kind of stuff. But especially here, because people are not able to come back as often as we used to. And so how do you create spaces that allow you to do what you need to do? Generosity. I actually think you're doing pretty good on generosity, so we're just going to continue to shape a year-round generosity program where we just keep talking about this all came from God. We are so blessed. It's not ours to begin with, right? We have the opportunity to participate with God as a co-creator in this ministry that we have. So why wouldn't we talk about that all year long and continue to have deep dives in faith conversation about what it means to belong wholly to God? Time, money, relationships, all of that kind of stuff. So continue to shape that. But I actually think you're in good shape. And then story. Story is multifaceted. Story is communication, certainly. We want to make sure that you know when to come to what, right? It's hard enough, right? But also then what's this committee doing? What's that committee doing? What's the council doing? But also then in a third way, helping us name our story of faith. As people who've been set free, what are we free from? What are we free from? And what are we freed for? What's our personal story? Because in evangelism, if that's true that that's something that we need to work on, that story is kind of the source and power for personal witnessing, for lack of a better term, right? Telling our story. So we got to know it first and be comfortable with it before we kind of move out in ways that are meaningful to share that story with others. But certainly for your own faith journey, it's good for us to know those stories, right? Any questions so far? So those are the 5 areas of recommendation that I have for you. Knowing that church is a busy place, we can only tackle a certain amount of things at a time. So we're going to get going with our shared vision team first and get that going, and that will kind of shape everything else. Before I go into what that looks like, questions, concerns, arguments, surprises. Does anything surprise you in what I've said? Are you asleep or you just what? Trained well. Come on, I like a feisty congregation. What doesn't make sense to you? Yes?
I think that the talk about the lay-led ministry is, I absolutely 100% see your point, but it's a very sensitive point.
It is. Yeah, and that's why I'm not recommending you change it. Okay, his question with Dennis? Yeah. Dennis brought up the fact that while there's some trueness to the struggle with kind of maintaining a lay-led congregation, there's a great deal, it's not pride, that's the right word, but it is very rooted in who you are. And we can't, that part can't change. So we need to be really, really careful. He called it sensitive. I would say it's just very close to your heartbeat as a congregation about the way that because it's a belief. You have a belief about how God works based on the way that you've chosen to organize yourselves, right? So I have some churches, for instance, some of the LCA churches, back before the ELCA merged, which this was ALC, yes? Okay, of course. But some of the LCA churches, do you guys know the difference between that? Okay, so the two, well, there was 3 bodies that merged in 1988 to form the ELCA. One was ALC, of which you were a part, and the other one was LCA, Lutheran Church in America and American Lutheran Church. I know, right? Seriously. And now we're Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. We just take dice with the letters and we just do that and see what we come up with. Anyway, so what's fascinating is I come from the ALC line very deeply, and my dad was on the staff of the national denomination, and so I very much have that in my own faith life and DNA. So when I encounter churches that are of the LCA history, it's fascinating. So can I give it some examples? So the pastor in an LCA church, it was very Herr Pastor, right? German roots. So very, I put thumbs down not because they're bad, but because the pastor would assert authority as the sole source of kind of authority and power. Not totally, but that's the way it worked in practice. So the senior pastor would be the chair of the board and the senior pastor. Typically, the vision and the ministries were set forth by the pastor, and it's a clergy-centric culture, I would say. So a lot of respect, and not that all y'all don't deserve a lot of respect as rostered leaders, but it was like so... So I have this church that I'm working with in Madison actually right now, and they're LCA, and they didn't know themselves to be this, and so they're waiting for the pastor to tell them what to do, and they're waiting for the staff to do it. And so I started to kind of unpack this for them, and they're like, well, Pastor, what would you like us to do? And he's like, I don't, this is your ministry. So we have to, and they need to become more lay-led, but they really struggle with that power differential because they're not sure how to do that. They're really atrophied, right? Their muscles, their lay power muscles are very atrophied. So you have really super strong, you guys are buff in the weightlifter type in the lay ministry, but we just have to focus it so that it goes towards the right things. So it goes towards ministry. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
And as I was full-time, I was the minister of music and did all of it. So I was thrown from the pastor to the worship and music committee to this person to that person, and in the end, I'm in the middle and I'm like, who was my boss? There was nobody that was my boss. And so
That's good.
I led them, I complained.
What?
I need to know my path here. I need a boss besides
Right.
God.
Right, yeah.
He ended up being my boss, and I led them through a process through my complaining, whereby they still had the lay leadership model, but this staff was under the pastor.
Right. So what,
To me, that's where I think you could go.
yeah,
It would be cleaner and easier for the entire staff.
correct. So clean it up is what she's saying. So she came from a place where, so what happens, right, is if no one's in charge, then no one's in charge. And it can feel a little bit like a pinball machine. Bing, 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 especially for staff and board leaders. And so just having some kind of clarity of roles, some clarity of path, right, would go a long way. We would know what to do with each other. And right now when I hear, well, I have to talk to 8 different boards, and then still no one has told any staff people or kind of thing. So we need to make sure, because the most important thing is our ministry, we just need to make sure the structures that support it are clear. Does that make sense? What else?
I think maybe that's where a lot of communication problem comes in.
Yeah.
Is if you don't get the board director communicating with the board or communicating with the council president or whatever.
Exactly.
Then the whole thing just gets,
Right.
then you have to ask 10 people.
Right.
Well, what's really happening here?
Maybe. There we go. So one of the things that is helpful for you to know in the leadership team when that gets going, which will be after the shared vision does a fair amount of its work, I'll have them start assessing. But any given congregation has 5, or in your case 6, leadership engines all working at the same time. It's a V6, if you will. That's about all I know about cars. That's it. That and where to put the gas. Okay, so this is not in order of importance, but this is just the order I'm going to write it in. The call and role of clergy and rostered leaders. Each rostered leader comes with a different set of gifts, different understanding of his or her call, and how they want to live that out in the context. Has anybody experienced different kinds of pastors, personalities, skills, gifts? Yeah. Oh, these are terrible markers. Okay. I'll do pastors and rostered leaders. We can't forget Mary. She's doing awesome stuff. All right. Then the next one is the functionality of your council. You know, what is their role? Are they managers? Are they visionaries? Are they keeping the lid on it? Are they communicating? What is their job? So the role of your council as your main, oh yeah, this is great. So just trust me, I'm writing. So what's their role and who's the boss of them, right? Who do they report to? How do they, usually it's the congregation, but. Okay, the next one is your role and functioning of your boards. You heard my cry. Here. Thank you. Donna's awesome. Okay. So the role of boards, right? And how many boards do you have? Anybody know? 9. Did you know that? Who, if that was a surprise, raise your hand. Right, there you go. Role of boards. What do they do? Who do they report to? What are they doing? Does anybody know what they're up to? And they do great work, right? That's a lot of the ministry that happens. Then you have the power of and how people live out their congregational member kind of laity, the sense that the congregation is owned by the people, and they're the ones that are driving it. So how do people vote? How do people get involved? How do they share their passions and their desires? So the power of the laity, and here that would be really strong. And then, of course, you would have, and this includes how people become part of you, so you can think about that belonging pathway. How well do you bring people in and help them understand what it means to be a layperson here? What did I say? How can I forget? Design of staff. How is that designed? Is that doing what it needs to do? A lot of times churches have kind of cobbled together staff, right? Bill was available to do this, Betty was available to do that, and so we just kind of cobbled together. And very rarely do we think how do we make sure we're aligned and we're able to use gifts and to make sure that everything's lining up and serving well. And then the last thing is, what's the plan? What are we working towards? Strategic or a vision or something. So these are the 6 ways, and you can imagine trying to align all this, right? So we need to make sure that they're all going in the same direction. Does that make sense? Other questions, concerns? Is there anything that's not on here that you thought would be? I'm not saying that.
The smaller committees, teams, whatnot, that function, even within boards and
kind of ministry teams that are actually doing and ministry teams. Is that a fair title? Okay. Yeah, you guys have this is going to be like herding cats a little bit, right? All right. Any questions about kind of what we found out before I talk about what's next? Are you happy with? Oh, Mary, yeah.
I just want to say how helpful it is to talk about this and hear the feedback and hear, that the lay-led structure is very important to the identity of the church. I don't think we've talked about it in this setting, in this way, and it's really helpful because these are the ways we try to live each week, and it's quite a process.
It is quite a process. It's blessed chaos is what it is. So one of the things that people, almost every single interview to a person said, we're a lay-led congregation. Like, well, technically everyone is in the ELCA, but yes, you are. And so we need to be really thoughtful about that. But the other thing I heard is there's some burnout, right? And so we have to be thoughtful about how we engage volunteers to do the work. And is the work that they're doing appropriate for their gifts? Is the work that they're doing life-giving? Are they as close to the center of ministry in their own interpretation as possible so that we can make sure that it has meaning for them as opposed to just a warm body to fill? Because that doesn't feel good. Question back here? Yeah, Nancy.
One thing interesting going through this process is beginning to realize things we've always done may not fit in the future based on what we really see who we are, and sometimes letting go of things to move forward can be difficult. And I think that's something we all have to have a conversation.
Yes. Just one second. So Nancy's point was it's helpful for us to hear and talk through and recognize that even though our history has been very valid in ministry, the way we've done it, while good in years past, we might need to just be thoughtful about how we shift that, and if that means changing things, which always means, folks, anytime there's change, that's fear of loss. That's loss. And there's a fair amount of loss in our culture, not only just the straight up violence and isolation and crazy stuff that's going on, but just loss of what was. Loss of a culture that supported churches, that where people kind of knew, thank you, yeah, please, where our language wasn't foreign, where we weren't looked weird at, right, because we go to church or we're a follower of Jesus, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a fair amount of loss anyway, even if we kept everything the same. There's a fair amount of loss. So your job as a congregation is to cling to those things that are important to you, because they won't change. They won't change. The non-negotiables, right, those core things that make you you. Okay, one more diagram before I get into the details, because it's fun. I always wanted to be a teacher. That's as close as I get. Okay, so I'm doing the circle, Dan and Daniel. Okay, so the middle one is why. How many of you have seen this, Simon Sinek? Okay, so it's not totally new to some of you. How and what? So he says, Simon Sinek, this guy who gets paid way too much money to write 3 circles on a whiteboard in front of a YouTube camera, he says every organization on the planet knows what it does. Right? Very few know why they do what they do. So you could probably tell me what you do. So I was in the 8 o'clock service. That's a what? That's one thing that you do. You have a choir and bells, I hear, right? You have an organ. What else? Confirmation. What? Yell. Sunday school. Don't be shy. Youth groups, small groups. What else? IHN. Childcare, yep. Nursery. Bible groups. Preschool. KPC across the street. Youth gathering, I don't know. So these are what we do. And so typically we get really excited about the what's, right? And we invite people into the what's and we define ourselves by the what's. But what's actually interesting is that when people engage with you, they engage because of your why. They're not super in love maybe with a hot dish potluck for the confirmation program. I used this yesterday. It's all I can think of. But they may be looking for a God of grace, a community that lets them be real, a way for them to live out their gifts, way to meet people who have similar values and believe in the same thing. But very often, we're living as if these are our whys. We exist to keep these things alive, right? Sustain them. VBS, right? And your day camp. What else? Right? Because we've experienced a loving God and an awesome community of faith, these become our center point. And so we choose to kind of focus on these. And the harder we focus and try and sustain these things and make these the most important thing, the further away our why goes, our holy purpose. The harder it is for us to remember that. But in actuality, we need to be focused and falling in love with our central purpose, our why. That could be our mission, our holy purpose, whatever you want to call it. And then from there, we can make decisions about what works now, what doesn't work now. And what happens is when you fall further and further into your why, you loosen your hold on your what's. So that you can say, okay, well, that worked really well in the 70s, but not so much anymore. We're going to tweak that, and we're going to have to do that a little differently. Because it's just a tool. This building is just a tool. Our staff, be nice when you say it, but they are tools. In a good way, in a good way. I've been waiting to say that for a long time. So when we invite people in, they are not motivated by data. Come to this, come to that, come to this. They're motivated by this. As a part of the brain that makes decisions, right? If you watch the video, the part of the brain that makes decisions isn't attached to the language center. So this is a gut feeling. So you want to let this why shine. You want it to direct everything you're doing so we don't get caught falling in love with these false idols, right? And it allow us to be faithful and shift what we're doing to be more efficient and effective for the sake of God's ministry here. All right, what's next? Any response to that before we move on? Ooh, we got to wrap up, huh? Okay. But I want to honor you. Any questions, comments, disagreements? We can arm wrestle after this personally out in the hallway so we can get ready for worship if you have things that you want to talk about. So what's next? So we are pulling together, first and foremost, our purpose mapping team will be writing up executive summaries to make sure that the congregation knows, because I am a communications addict, and I want you guys to hear over and over and over again exactly what we're doing and involve you in feedback and comments and just find ways for the congregation to be involved. And so the purpose mapping team, I'm pointing to Donna, purpose mapping team will shape some summaries that will be shared so everybody understands what's happening. And then from there, we're going to create the shared vision waypoint team. That will be a group of 6 to 8 people who will, with the input that's been given and then continue to get from the congregation, will be shaping, taking a look at our current mission, identifying some values, sharing those with you and getting input, and then moving into a process by which we look at long-term vision and short-term vision. That will take probably, I'm guessing, at least 9 months. And then as that gets going, we'll create a leadership waypoint team that will look at those 6 areas and just take a look at where we need to tighten things up and create communication and make sure we're all going in the same direction. And that's about as much as you guys can handle right now because you are a busy, healthy church. And we want that to be the main thing. So if you are interested in learning more about the Shared Vision Waypoint team, John Thompson is the person who's collecting names. Whether you would like to give input or be considered in some way as participating in the shaping of that team or the information that they use, please see John or email him or call him after 9 p.m. on his cell phone. He loves those midnight conversations. And then I will be back to work with your council on Saturday, July 14th to do the transition into the new council and work with them to shape their role and then kick off our shared vision team for a training. And so my job is to make sure that the purpose mapping team and these waypoint teams communicate with you so you know exactly what's happening and that it's a shared vision and a leadership structure that you think would support what this congregation does and is and what will be in the future. Have I bored you to death? Are you stunned? Do you need more coffee? Any feedback before we go into worship? Wow, are they always this quiet?
Just wait till you walk out.
I know. I can't tell if they're just thinking or just disagreeing with me. Yes, we're good? Okay. Go in peace and serve the Lord.